Hey, Margie here. Do you use protein powders and bars as a way of getting enough protein in your diet? Well, if so, you definitely don't want to miss this episode because unfortunately, some of the ingredients in these products can negatively affect your bones and overall health. And that's what we're going to talk about today with our very special guest, Mira Dessy. And Mira is a good friend, and she's also known as the ingredient guru. She's a holistic nutrition professional, author, and a popular public speaker. And she knows it's not just what you eat, but what's in what you eat. Mira is board certified holistic health practitioner, and she's been working with clients for over 15 years with chronic health issues, finding nourishing solutions for wellness. And Mira is my go-to person when it comes to ingredients. And I thought this was just such an important topic because it's something I get asked all the time about protein powders and protein bars and, which ones are good. And I just think you're going to get so much out of this episode because Mira tells you about all these ingredients you need to look for. So stay tuned. Welcome, Mira. I'm so excited to have you here on the podcast. The last time you were on, you did a phenomenal talk on avoid these ingredients if you have osteoporosis. And I got so many comments and thank you, and people didn't realize about certain things. So anyway, I decided that since protein is so important for our bones and something that makes up the collagen matrix and really is an essential ingredient that oftentimes we're not getting enough of. So a lot of times people need to resort to different protein powders and different ways to get protein. But there's a lot of ingredients in these that are not healthy for us. So I thought my favorite ingredient guru is you, Mira, and thank you for coming back. And we're going to shed some light on this topic. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here, Margie. I always love talking with you, and you have such a great engaged audience. They ask beautiful questions, and I also know that they're really invested in paying attention to what's in what they eat. So I love that you have me on to share about that.
Okay, well, Miss Ingredient Guru, here we go. Let's start with what people don't even know. What are some of the common allergens that can be found in protein products that we need to be aware of, especially when it comes to our bones?
One of the challenges that people run into, they start adding, I call them protein products. They've learned that they need more protein. They're having a hard time eating that many grams. And so they decide that they're going to resort to a drink, a shake, a bar, some other kind of a product. And they're so focused on the protein part that they forget to think about where it's being sourced from. So eggs certainly are an issue. Dairy is always an issue. And for a lot of people, they forget that word whey comes from dairy. That's a whey protein. So it's a dairy product. If you have a sensitivity to dairy, or if you should be avoiding dairy for any reason, you shouldn't be doing that. And then one of the other biggies that shows up a lot is corn, because corn gets turned into so many different products. It's a form of starch. It's in dextrose, which is a type of sugar. It's in maltodextrin. And corn winds up being one of the really big ones that a lot of people don't pay attention to because they're not maybe as aware of it as they should be.
What's the problem with eggs?
With eggs, it's just that it's an allergen. So if you're someone who's used to taking a certain protein product and you're not paying attention to the fact that the protein that it's being sourced from is eggs, you could be having an issue. I have people sometimes who will do some food sensitivity testing because, they're having digestive issues or other things are going on, and they're told that they're supposed to avoid eggs, and they forget to look at processed products because, again, they're just focused on that bar that says 20 grams of protein, and they're thinking they can stuff it down pretty easily.
You mentioned corn, and so often corn can be GMO. You want to just talk about that? Because how often do we need to check for GMOs in our protein products? Because that can be a real issue.
I believe we do. One of the biggest challenges we have with those genetically modified products is that those crops, because typically it's plant matter, They are genetically modified in order to be able to withstand being sprayed with glyphosate. And that glyphosate doesn't go away when they process those ingredients. And all of a sudden, you're taking in a lot of glyphosate. It's a chelator, so it binds with nutrients, making them unavailable for you to absorb. It also can change your microbiome, which is not great. And when we're looking at the bars, even if it doesn't have corn in it, it may have other GMO products in it. And so you really want to make sure that it's either organic or that it says that it is somehow non-GMO. Either it's been through the non-GMO project verified, or there's a little label that says that it does not have genetically modified organisms. And then the one addendum to that is nowadays we have this whole new thing called BE, which stands for bioengineered. And technically, bioengineering is a little bit different than GMO, than genetic modification. However, we also want to avoid any product that has on the label, and it'll usually be below the ingredient pan, it'll say made with bioengineered ingredients or made with BE. And so we need to watch out for that as well.
Oh, and how common is that, Mira?
It's becoming more common. I actually was over at someone's house the other day and they hauled their mayonnaise out of the refrigerator and said, "Can you tell me what this means?" And I was like, "It means don't eat it."
Let's just review this. So as long as it has the USDA organic label, which is always our most trusted label, okay. And if it has the GMO project verified, are we okay?
We're okay.
So it won't have that and the BE.
It won't be BE and non-GMO project verified.
Okay. Okay. But if it has nothing on it, beware. And especially if we see BE, absolutely beware. Oh my, wow.
They're bioengineered. And they do, weirdly enough, there was this huge fight years ago to try to get, if someone had genetically modified products in their genetically modified ingredients in their product. And that fight got lost over and over and over. And now, for whatever reason, they have to disclose if it's bioengineered. So I encourage people to watch out for it and to avoid it.
Okay. And is it different in other countries? Because I know so often things are sent to this country that contain GMOs that aren't allowed in Europe and other places. Is that true with some of the protein powders and bars? Do you know?
It depends on where it's made and what the regulation is for where it's being sold in terms of how they have to label it. Now, it doesn't mean that some things don't slip through sometimes. And my word of warning to people is we can't get too wrapped around the axle about that. If things get caught, there is a recall. They are reformulated, they are relabeled. And so we need to really be as focused on making sure that in general, we are getting a real food, whole food, nutrient-dense diet. These protein products fall into sort of a subcategory because we're looking to boost protein levels.
Okay, so let's talk about sugar because so when someone's looking at their protein powder or their protein bar, in terms of the sugar, because often it will say sugar or sugar alcohol. So talk about what they should look for, but because there's more to it than that, it can actually affect the protein. So why don't you explain that concept a little bit?
Yeah, and I will share that the vast majority of protein powders don't tend to have a lot of sugar in them. However, protein shakes tend to have a lot of sugar because they're looking to make it sweet and palatable. It's already mixed for you. And then protein bars, the vast majority of protein bars, in my opinion, are nothing more than glorified adult candy bars because they just have so much sugar. If they put a lot of sugar in them, sometimes one of the ways they'll hide it on the label is by breaking down how many different kinds of sugar. So you'll see something that says rice bran syrup, and then you'll see maltodextrin, and then you'll see brown rice syrup. Like they'll put a couple different kinds in there to try so that it's not the number one ingredient. The other thing that we have to watch out for is there can be, because people are watching out for their sugars, they can say 2 grams of sugar or less than 1 gram of sugar, and they're using a ton of sugar alcohols. And sugar alcohols can have a very strong effect on the digestive system. They can be highly laxative, cause a lot of bloating, cause gas, cause discomfort, diarrhea, all those kinds of things. And so you really want to be cautious about how much sugar alcohol you're taking in. I actually encourage people to keep it to a minimum because of the disruption to the gut function.
So what you're saying is it may say 5 grams of sugar or 2 grams of sugar. What would the sugar alcohols be called? What would the names be that people will say?
Yeah, great question. Things are changing a little bit with some of the sugars because they're finding ways to end run around them. But in general, if it adds in an ose, O-S-E, it's a sugar, fructose, sucrose, that kind of thing. If it ends in an ol, O-L, it's a sugar alcohol. So erythritol, sorbitol, that kind of thing. Now, there is one sugar that I don't encourage people to take, and this is appearing a lot in protein bars and protein cookies. Actually, I've seen it in some protein cookies as well. It's called allulose, so it ends in an ose, which is not great. Allulose is a naturally occurring sugar that does come from things like raisins and dates and stuff like that, but it appears in really minute quantities. And there's a company out there that figured out how to make a lot of it. And all of a sudden, they're using it in a lot of products as the primary sugar because it's supposed to bypass the body so you don't absorb it the same way. It's a natural sugar, and that it really is a misnomer, and it's a bit deceptive. I have so many gut health clients who have to avoid allulose at all costs because it just wrecks their gut.
So what typically are we going to see this allulose in?
Like I said, protein bars, I've seen it in protein cookies, and then just on the regular grocery store shelf, I've seen it in a lot of different products, mostly baked goods. It's
You want to spell it? So it's you want to just spell it for everybody? So, because this is, we want to definitely make sure we're not having too much of this. Can you just spell it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's spelled allulose, allulose.
The other thing, Mira, do you have it with you? Because I have mine on my bookshelf, the book that you wrote. Because because there's a lot of things to know, but Mira put it all together in a really easy, small book, not a huge book. You want to just show everybody?
Yeah, so it's called The Pantry Principle: How to Read the Label and Understand What's Really in Your Food. And I am going to say, allulose is not in this book. I'm working on a second edition because the time has come to revise it. Allulose is a relatively new product, so it's not in here yet. But trust me,
but everything else is in there in terms of, you really go
talking
through
about artificial sweeteners. The other thing that we really want to watch out for when we're looking at, especially the shakes and the powders, sometimes they will have artificial ingredients in them. They have artificial flavors. I'm not a fan of that at all. They have artificial sweeteners, definitely not a fan of those. And then sometimes in the liquid formulations, they will have artificial colors. The artificial colors are made from petroleum. They're not good for our brain. And I know people are taking this because they're like, oh, I can just drink a quick protein shake. But if all of those ingredients aren't nourishing for you, then you're not helping your body in general. And you're also not helping the bone matrix because your body has to work through everything else in order to get to that protein.
It's very interesting because I'll have people show me something that at the health club, their trainer said this is the absolute best, or their yoga instructor, or so. People mean well, but they just don't have the knowledge. And, there's just so much advertising and so much hype with different things that once again, we have to be in charge. You cannot listen to what other people say because, you have to know, you have to understand. And it's unfortunate do you agree, Mira, that it's just...
I do. And I think one of the challenges too is that sometimes there are ingredients in things that we're not really aware of, But because we're trying to get that protein in and somebody recommended it, we're like, oh, that must be good. One of my least favorite ingredients that appears a lot in a fair number of protein products is carrageenan. And you and I have talked about this one before. Carrageenan is a red seaweed, and it can be so disruptive to the gut. It's an emulsifier, so it tends to appear a lot in the liquid formulations. Side note, it also appears in alternative dairy products like almond milk and that kind of thing. And it's so disruptive to the gut. It has been shown in studies to cause bumps on the kidneys, renal bumps. And in some cases, it's been shown to cause ulcerative colitis-like symptoms in the body. So we definitely want to watch out for that. And at this point, people are probably going, well, then what's the point? Like, how do you get healthy protein? And the answer is there are healthy protein choices out there. It's when we're trying to do an end run around it by buying these prepared products that are really high in sugar or other ingredients that we don't want.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mira, because that podcast episode, we have over 80,000 people who've watched it, and so many people commented, because you mentioned the carrageenan there. I mean, you've probably seen it also. So many people said, carrageenan's in this. And there were people who knew about it that avoided it, but there were people like, I had no idea. And it's in so many things that I consume. So it's just something to truly be aware of. And not that we're trying to scare you, because as you said, there's a lot of companies there's a lot of fabulous things, but we just want to make you aware so that you are looking, at all the different things that you consume.
And I would love to interject actually just one thing that you brought up, such a great side point. So many people said, oh, it's in so many things that I'm eating. I had no idea. Part of the reason it can be in those things is because there is something called generally recognized as safe. It's referred to as GRAS labeling. So it's generally recognized as safe. You can have up to a certain amount and it won't be bad for you. The challenge is they never publish how much. You have to really go digging to find out how many parts per million, how many percentages of a gram or whatever. And nobody's keeping track of how much you're eating. So if you are all of a sudden consuming a lot of products that have these ingredients in them and you're having it multiple times a day, you're getting much more than you realize. And that then also has a very negative impact. And the goal is to be building strong, healthy bones and to be building healthy muscle and to make sure that we have a good metabolism. And that's why we really want to pay attention to the label.
Hey, Margie here. High-quality supplements are a big part of a comprehensive osteoporosis program. To help you, I offer a significant discount every day in my supplement store through Fullscript. Fullscript has the most extensive catalog of professional-grade supplements and wellness products I've ever found. So all you need to do is go to tinyurl.com. That's tinyurl.com/supplements for less. And you'll get to my Fullscript store. And in there, you'll see my favorite bone building supplements. So make sure to check it out. And the link will also be in the show notes. So let's get back to the show. Another issue, Mira, is that some of these protein products have added hormones or antibiotics, and people have no idea about that. It's not written, oh, this contains hormones or this contains antibiotics.
Yeah, any of the dairy-based formulations, if those dairy products come from conventionally raised cows, there is a higher than average chance that those cows have been given a hormone called either RBST or RBGH. Those are growth hormones, and they make the cows give more milk. Unfortunately, when they milk the cow and process that milk into whatever the product is, that added hormone doesn't go away. And then a lot of antibiotics wind up finding their way into the dairy herd as a prophylactic impact to make sure that the cows don't get sick, because obviously a sick cow that can't produce milk is not useful to the farmer. And though, again, those antibiotics don't go away. And there have been studies over the years that have actually shown that the high level of antibiotics in our animal products that we eat may be responsible for the rising levels of antibiotic resistant disease. So you want to make sure if you're buying, and usually it's going to be either the powder or the liquid where you're going to see that, you want to make sure that it's from cows that are not treated with hormones or with antibiotics.
Okay, now, are there any specific additives, anything else that we need to watch for that might be on the label, that they just throw in that could be?
Yeah. So, like I said, anything synthetic, preservatives, those kinds of things are not great either. Soy, I know you and I are both not necessarily huge fans of soy for a number of reasons. And then I also just want to mention, not that, we covered it sort of in sugars, but we didn't specifically name it, high fructose corn syrup. And I also want to mention, and I have not seen this in a protein product, but I'm just mentioning it because it ties in, crystalline fructose. If that's in any of the liquid formulations, it's essentially dehydrated high fructose corn syrup, and it's very high in fructose, which is not good for your liver.
Okay. So in terms of, we're dealing with people who have, who really want strong, healthy bones. And we know that animal protein is really effective. What do you recommend for the vegetarians in the world? Like, what are your favorite, for people who don't take animal protein, what are your favorite ways to get, what are your favorite, for vegetarians and others, what are your favorite, types of powders or types of protein, sources, I guess?
Sure. And I would break that down into two different categories because there are a lot of vegetarians who are willing to do egg or dairy products. And so for them, it's a little bit easier. If you're someone who's vegan and you do no animal product whatsoever, it becomes a little bit more challenging. And this is where you would want to rely heavily on things like a pea protein. And you would also want to make sure that you're getting good sources of protein in your diet, nuts and mushrooms and things like that. If you're willing to eat fish as a vegetarian, that can be another source for you. As a vegan, obviously that option is out. And so for people who follow a vegan diet, I do encourage micronutrient testing in order to make sure that they are nutritionally sufficient, especially for the amino acids.
Yeah. And on that topic, I have to introduce something. This is what I've been taking. I brought to what I've been taking. Dr. Kim Millman turned me on to this. It's called Perfect Amino, and it has 8 amino acids, and it's just a wonderful way. And these are also amino acids that aren't typically in a lot of the food that we're consuming. So it's just, she's had incredible results with sarcopenia. It comes in either pills or shakes. But anyway, this is just an example of one that's clean, that doesn't, that's been very successful for people. And, when we use the good brands, what have you found, Mira? Because there's certainly a lot of good protein powder. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. There are some really good choices, and it's great that has 8, because there are 8 essential amino acids that we do not get from our food, that we can't metabolize well, that we need to get from our food. We can't metabolize well unless we've got those in our system. And there can be really good choices. There are clean protein powders out there that are well balanced and easily digestible. I think the biggest problem is, for so many people, they want to go to like a Walmart or another store like that, and they want to buy the biggest, cheapest container that they can, and they don't realize that it's probably got a lot of starchy stuff in there, like tapioca starch or rice starch or things like that as fillers, and that's not great. It's really better to spend the money and get a good quality, clean protein and make sure that you're nourishing your body well. And also, I would encourage people to not rely specifically on these other protein products, to make sure that you work with your body and figure out, if you need, let's say, 100 grams of protein a day, how many grams can you reasonably eat before you start to feel like maybe it's too much or you can't get it all in? And then we look at these as add-ons. It's not like, oh, I'm going to get 100 grams out of shakes and bars. It's, I want to eat. Can I reasonably eat 85 grams of protein? And then I get the rest from an alternative source because it's easier to drink it or whatever. Can I get 90 grams? How much can you do without having to overwhelm your system?
And this is such an interesting point because years ago, people were just told, oh, if you have too much protein, you're going to leach calcium from your urine. And what they found in all the research is that is absolutely not true. And it's a huge problem as people age. They are not getting enough protein. And the RDA, which is the recommended dietary allowance, is the very minimal not to have problems. It's not enough. When they've looked at studies of bone density, you need more protein. This is not something you can go without. So I think that, and clean protein, grass-fed, organic, wild, it really matters where things are sourced. This is not where you want to be cheap on in terms of the sourcing.
And protein is so important for so many aspects of our health and well-being because, as you and I are talking about, yes, it's fabulous for bone health, but also for our muscles, for focus, for attention, for energy. All those amino acids, some of them become the base product to make neurotransmitters. Like there are just so many reasons why we need it. And so we want to make sure that we are getting the cleanest source that we can so that we're nourishing our body instead of just trying to stuff in protein. And one of the challenging parts of that is, food producers pay a lot of attention to what the buzzwords are. And I don't know, you probably remember, 20 years ago, it was all about fiber. And so every product you saw in the grocery store shelf told you how many grams of fiber it had. And now they're putting protein in breakfast cereal. Well, it's an exploded grain product. That is not a great source of protein for you. They're trying to put, my joke is if they thought they could sell protein-laden shoe polish, they would. But, they really are trying to put the word protein on everything. And so it's up to you as the consumer to really evaluate that source of protein and make sure that it's what it says it is and that it's going to be a good choice for you.
Right. Because, people think, oh, I'm doing something really wonderful for myself, for my bones. But in turn, when you are buying that massive container that's full of all sorts of additives, you're really doing yourself, unfortunately, a disservice. I mean, yes, you might be getting more protein, but that's just not the way we want to get it. And we don't want to have any side effects. And there unfortunately are so many.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I would also say that we have to remember that our protein needs change. So let's say you start adding more protein to your diet and you start feeling better, you start going to the gym more, and you start being able to function at a higher level physically, you need to sit down and sort of reevaluate, do I need maybe a little bit more? If you're doing strength training or if you're doing endurance running or if you're doing swimming even, like anything that you're doing that starts to bump you up metabolically, you need to look at your protein levels and make sure that you're balancing the way your body needs you to.
That's such a good point. I recently started on, now it's been a couple months, the Sonero strength training. So I'm doing serious strength training and I absolutely find that I need more protein. And so a lot of times it's not the same. Like each person does not have the same level of activity and does not need the same protein. So yeah, that's a great point, Mira. The other thing I think sometimes when, what are the key things we need if there was an emergency? And this is something that you specialize in, Mira, but you always want to have protein available in different ways so that if there is an emergency, you want to share something about that, Mira, because
Sure.
It's something you talk about a lot. And, most of us don't really think about it. We don't think about, is there issues with emergencies, but you just had one, right, Mira?
Yeah, so I live in Texas. I live in Southeast Texas, and we just went through Hurricane Beryl. So that was, really challenging. And one of the things that a lot of people don't necessarily think about is how they're going to eat after an emergency or even during an emergency. Everybody thinks they can just go to the grocery store. And the problem is the grocery store gets emptied really fast. And depending on the storm, they possibly can't resupply. I mean, my local grocery store, it took probably more than a week for them to be fully resupplied. And you want to make sure that, especially if you're focusing on protein, that you have good sources of protein. And I'm not just talking the proteins and the bars and the powders here. I'm talking other sources of protein like beans and having canned fish, good quality canned fish, good quality canned meats, having dried meats available. You can get little protein bars that are actually like beef jerky bars or sticks. I love, one of my favorites is the Chomps bars. They make a venison one that's so delicious. They're not bars, they're sticks, but they're delicious. But you want to make sure that you have it on hand and that you have enough for everybody in the house. It's not just, oh, I'm increasing my protein because we want to make sure that we have a supply in case we can't get to the grocery store, and we want to use it. We want to rotate it. We don't want to just stuff it in the back of a closet. But having that, making sure you have enough water. Water is also hugely important. Regardless of whether you're eating more protein or not, we always want to make sure that we're hydrating so that our body can flush toxins and so that it can be, well supported. And then looking at whatever your other needs are for whatever your diet is based on your activity level, your health level, and your health goals.
One of my favorites is sardines, which is incredible for your bones because there's a lot of calcium as long as you buy it with the bones. That's one of my faves. And the other thing is, yes, I love the Chomps. I also like Paleo Valley makes these delicious sticks. Yes. I like the turkey. I always travel with something like that on an airplane because it's a quick source of protein. You just never know when you're going to be detained or when something's late. So it's so good to have these protein sources with you.
And it's probably better to eat the sticks than the sardines when you're on the airplane.
Oh, yeah. I don't bring the sardines on the airplane. No. I'm just saying the sardines are like something I have in the house.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, it's funny because you can take them with you.
Yeah, but that would be
plane. Yeah. Actually, another friend of ours just shared a really funny little meme. I'll see if I can find it and share it with you, where she had a can of fish, sardines, and a can of salmon. And she said, which one is allowed on the airplane and why? And the answer was the sardines, because it was less than 100 grams. So even though it was liquid, it was allowed on because
that's hysterical. I wouldn't have even thought of that. That's very funny. Wow. Mira, why don't you, because you have a course on this, we want to just share with people what you do, and because if people want to learn more about being prepared, which we just never know, and most people have no clue how to stock a pantry normally, but even especially under if something happened, like what are essentials and what are easy ways to do that. But you want to just share some of the things that you offer?
Sure. So I have a course called the Preparedness Pantry Masterclass. And, it came out of years of lived experience, having been through a whole bunch of emergencies. I live in Texas. We're in Hurricane Alley, but I've also lived in other areas where we've had blizzards, and then there's parts of the country that have wildfires or mudslides. We've been through flooding, all different kinds of things. And so you just want to make sure that you're prepared for an emergency. And I also feel like when there's an emergency, Margie, the last place you want to be is in that line of cars heading to the grocery store. People are stressed. It's overwhelming. It's going to take you 3 times as long to get out of the store. Like, don't even have to go there. So I teach people how to build a pantry that will allow them to support themselves and their family for 14 to 30 days, and how to have enough water, how to be able to cook if your power's out, what to do if you have no electricity, how do you deal with first aid in an emergency situation, all that kind of stuff. So I just have this really great course that helps support people. I'm happy to send you a link if you want to share it with people.
Yeah, no, we got that link. So if people are interested, I made it easy. So it's just tinyurl.com/myhealthypantry. And I'll put the link in the show notes so that anybody can, who's interested in that can take advantage of that. And just tell other people what you do as well in terms of, how you work with people too, because
Yeah, so I'm a nutrition educator. I'm known as the ingredient guru, as Margie said. Like that's why I wrote this book. I just my own health journey. I learned that what's in what we eat is hugely important. And so I help other people with chronic health issues find real food solutions to deal with their chronic health issues and turn that around.
okay, great. So we'll have the link to your website and then people can, learn more as well. And so, well, we could go on and on, but I think we gave people the basics to really examine and not just say, oh, this is protein and it's okay, and to really look into all the things we talked about. Is there any last minute things you want to leave everybody with?
I just want to share that this does not have to be a big, overwhelming thing. You simply start somewhere. If you're someone who's looking to add more protein and you're trying to figure out what's the best option for you, decide that you're going to read the label every time you pick up the product. And if you don't understand it, you're not going to get it. Or you're going to evaluate yourself and see how much protein you can reasonably eat before you have to turn to some of these protein products. But just to really be in tune with your body and take things one step at a time.
Okay, well, I love that. It's such good advice. And it's always a pleasure to be here with you, Mira. And I just can't thank you enough. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on. It's always great to talk with you.
I hope you learned as much as I did from Mira and now have a better understanding of what ingredients you need to look out for in your protein bars, protein powders. All the links that Mira talked about will be in the show notes, including her link to a Prepared Pantry Masterclass. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.